Hello and welcome to a new episode of Other Record Labels. I'm your host, Scott Orr, where we talk about the art and culture of running an independent record label. Thank you so much for tuning in and listening. We have a great episode for you today. A couple of years ago, actually just a few months after I started this podcast, I was reading this book called The Revenge of Analog. I highly recommend it, author David Sachs. And it's about like how all of these older formats like vinyl and Polaroid and notebooks were coming back and becoming more popular. It's a really great book. It really, really is a great book. I was reading this book and I was like, man, I really have some questions for this author. And then I found out this author, David Sachs, is local. He lived, half an hour from me. And so I thought, wow, this would be a great opportunity. I really want to interview him for my podcast. But at the time, the podcast was just interviewing record labels. And so that's how I came up with this sub-series called Industry Insiders, because I needed an excuse to interview the author of this great book that I thought my audience would be really interested in hearing about. And so that's how we came up with Industry Insiders. It's since evolved where I've spoke with people from Bandcamp, I've spoke with people from pressing plants, and from CD Baby. I've talked to bio writers and college radio specialists, and these industry insiders have been very popular. People really love to kind of take a break and focus on a really specific niche within the record label industry. And so today's episode is with Jenn, who's the founder of Women in Vinyl. This is such a fun episode. It was very enlightening. It was very interesting to talk about this subject. And I think this is an incredible organization. And I talk a little bit about at the end how you can get in touch and get involved with this organization. But in the meantime, you can check them out at womeninvinyl.com. But please enjoy today's interview.
Yeah, so I started Women in Vinyl in 2018. I started working in the vinyl manufacturing industry, and I just realized that there were a lot of women sort of behind the scenes doing things bigger than what people thought they were doing, and they weren't really represented very well. Vinyl's always been a more male-dominated industry. And then there was this meme that was going around social media, and it was of a 1950s couple, and the guy is holding a record, and he's nerding out about like what pressing it was, and his wife is sitting there knitting, and she's basically like, I could care less. And everyone was reposting this thing like so many times, and it just started to get under my skin because I was like, I'm the guy. Like, I have 40 versions of Master of Reality. So, I mean, like, I have another account where I dive in, research those. So, like, that's me. Yeah. And so I decided to start Women in Vinyl as a blog and sort of show what these women are doing and how they're sort of paving the way. Because I think a lot of women are nervous to be involved in something that feels sort of, they're afraid to ask questions. It can feel like a guy's club, and if we're in it, we're supposed to know everything already. Yes, and it's just like, it's impossible to just start something or be interested in something and know everything about it. So I wanted to create sort of a safe space for women to find role models, girls to find ways into the industry. Like I mentioned before, I was a designer before this, and I've always been artistic, but I didn't play an instrument. So I didn't know that this was a career path for me. So I want to create a space for people, not just women, but, anyone to find jobs in the industry, find role models in the industry, learn about it. I think there's so many misconceptions to like that your center label is a sticker. Things like that people just don't know. And so if there's a place for them to learn that and not feel like I should already know this, then that is a great place to start. So our like educate, demystify, and diversify are really our like targets.
By the way, I've just learned that sticker thing about a year ago. It was pretty eye-opening. It was pretty exciting.
Yeah. You had Robin on, she is a lathe cutter, and so they do use stickers, but most of the people who are pressing a record will refer to the stickers. And I'm like, do you mean labels? Because we don't have stickers on this order.
Right, yeah.
So yeah, it is. It's, all of that kind of stuff, you need to learn it somewhere. So.
And they play a bit of a role too, don't they? Like in balancing things, like aren't they kind of like not just a label, but they have like a bit of a utility? Is that true?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, so if you were to press a one-sided record, for example, and you didn't have a label on the other side, because that pressure isn't equal, it can cause some like dishing or like a bowl type warp.
Interesting.
But yeah, so and they go on either side of the puck when it goes into the machine to be pressed. So
right.
Yeah.
Sorry, that's a pointless tangent, but it is fun. This is so fascinating to me. I did these studio tours on YouTube a few years ago, and the analytics said that our audience was 99.5% male or something like super crazy like that. And when I saw that stat, I found it like alarming. I thought it's not that women don't care about audio and music production. There's obviously something wrong here. It's bigger than just saying, oh, well, they're not interested. That must be a challenge for you guys, that in not only dealing with actual inequality, but also the impact it has on this generation and the next generation. Is that true?
Yeah, I mean, I think, we're trying to break down some of those barriers and help people understand that there is this sort of, that it's not an equal playing field. And I think for a lot of people, it's hard to understand because anybody who is accepting obviously doesn't always see a prejudice or where there isn't diversity, but it's definitely something that we hear and we see. And, when I talk to people, a lot of women, like after we'll record or after we'll do a blog post, we'll sort of follow up with, I wanted to share this, but, or,
interesting.
I don't want to sound like this because, because we're all trying to have careers here too.
Yeah.
So it's a hard and a fine line to walk between opening people's eyes and also, making sure that we can thrive. So I think it's a really interesting thing that I've found.
Something you said earlier on when you were talking about not even realizing that this was like a career path or an option. My daughter is 9 and we were watching football a couple of years ago, and she asked me why girls can't play football. And I was like taken aback because I was like, well, girls can play whatever they want. But she was just defaulted to thinking that they weren't allowed because in her lifetime, she's never seen a woman play football on television, right? So she just thinks they're just not allowed to do that. But that's so weird, eh? Like how that happens, and it actually takes work to try to unravel that.
Yeah. I mean, I've just never understood it. I'm like, vinyl collecting, I think, is sort of where it starts, but it still at that level doesn't make sense to me because, girls collect things too.
Yeah, that's true.
So it's just, I don't know. I think it's that there is sort of an elitist, I think, mentality in some cases. And I think the newer generation is starting to sort of break that down, but it's still there.
Yeah.
It just is.
I am fascinated about the idea of representation and how, especially in this music and audio industry, how represented certain groups are. And I think I'm starting to understand it a lot more, the impact of a young woman or a person of color when they have someone that they can look up to, like you had mentioned, or just at least that evidence that it's possible. Is that something that you're starting to see more, that people are, we're talking about not only being accepting of it and the younger generation changing that, but gosh, it must just be cool for people to see your website, to see the women who own record stores or women who run pressing plants. That's got to be huge.
It is. It's great. I mean, I have people reach out because they admired someone they read about and they want to get connected to them, or who just say that, they're inspired to, get started in this, or if I have other resources. And, it's just one of those things where, like, if you didn't know anything about this, and you are a minority within a group of people, and you have a question like, how do you set up your turntable? Who do you ask if you don't see anybody like you in that group?
Right.
It can be intimidating. So I think that kind of stuff is where we're trying to, create white papers and podcasts and videos and things like that, so that people have that reference point if they are still nervous to ask those kinds of questions. Because, there are guys out there too that are getting into this and don't know how to set up a turntable, and maybe they need a resource, and, why not help there too?
Yeah, I've and it is like, I think it's changing. You're right. That especially the hi-fi space and the website that is now renamed to Gear Space. But gosh, it's like very violent. Like, it's just, people are very aggressive, and I can only imagine like asking a question about a turntable. Yeah, I wouldn't want to do that publicly.
I mean, even I've had people just on Instagram on my personal page, when I post things, say, oh, you're posting your boyfriend's records, or you don't deserve to listen to this kind of thing, or I hope you die so that someone else can get your Black Sabbath collection. I was just
my goodness.
What? It's just crazy. I mean, the kinds of things. And of course, there's like internet trolls and whatever, but, again, this is the kind of thing that can deter someone from wanting to get into vinyl.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. And that's, what we talk about. Like when you talk about privilege, is that like nobody would say that to me, and I'm an idiot. Like I shouldn't be getting into a lot of this stuff, but nobody will say that to me. That's brutal. That's just, to me, that's like a cliche. That person is being like an example you would read about on like CNN or something. It's not even creative.
Exactly. At least be creative.
It's like there's a stock list of insults you're supposed to use if you feel your authority's been taken away or something. Oh
right.
My goodness. I also, tell me if this is true in any way. I also see it as a really exciting time for women entrepreneurs, because I think that a brand's aesthetic and personality is so important. And in the music audio space and the music industry, everything has been so masculine, especially recording studios or to an extent even record stores. And so I think there's this great opportunity for a completely new way of doing things that looks and feels different from the mold that we're used to. Is that something you're witnessing?
Yeah, I mean, my big thing is that you can't expand and grow and innovate without a bunch of different opinions and thoughts and backgrounds. And so I think it's a good time for that in the music community, because especially with vinyl, it's the same process. It's the same. We've been pressing records the same way since we've been pressing records.
Yeah.
So now with this resurgence that's come, and with it being something that we aren't seeing going away, it needs innovation now. How are we going to make records faster? How are we going to make them more eco-friendly? How are we going to continue to keep records here? And I think having these other opinions is really important. And so I think that is an exciting thing. And I have to say, everybody in the industry, for the most part, is extremely accepting and supportive of women in vinyl. And that has been really awesome.
Yeah, that's great to hear. And I kind of get the sense too, there's a huge evolution happening from the people that I talk to. And I mean, of course, there's those trolls, but really they're being shut down quite a lot. And it really that's really great to hear. Kind of based on that, what we were talking about, this has been like echoing in my head for the past couple of weeks. I did an interview with a label in the US called Loretta Records, and Katrina is the founder. And she said something in her interview that's just been like ping-ponging in my brain for so long. And she was talking about how indie record labels started as like a contrast to the major labels, yet like we're always like, we default to copying their model. And it's kind of our response. I'm paraphrasing, but like it's kind of our response to our responsibility to do something innovative, like you said, and do something different. So just when you were saying that, I was reminded of that again. And it's like we don't need to follow that, traditional mold.
Right. Exactly.
I think I interrupted the origin story about a half an hour ago, but so this meme was going around, and you started the blog. How did it kind of morph into what it is today?
Well, after the blog started and I saw that this was something that there was a need for it and people wanted it, and I was really passionate about it, I decided that I sort of needed to take it to the next level. And I've done a lot of things before I was in the music industry. Like I mentioned before this, I was a designer, and then I worked as a career advisor for an art college, the school that I went to. And advising, career advising in particular, it's a huge passion of mine.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I mean, I love mentoring. I love connecting people with like that right place for them. And so this is sort of like a perfect marriage of the things, where, creating job boards and role models and connecting people with the industry is sort of it's just a great partnership. So I always knew that the next step for Women in Vinyl would be to make it a nonprofit so that we could raise scholarship funds and then that way help girls, find their way to DJ school sooner, mastering, all of these avenues that they may not always see available. And so over the past year and a half, really, we gained a lot of momentum, solidified the board, or at least our like 4 main members. And then, expanded with the podcast, which is, I think we just recorded our 11th episode.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah. And, I mean, tons of other things that I'm still working on. We're finally like an actual registered business. So the nonprofit, 501c3 is next, which
I imagine that's
whole new
pretty
world.
daunting. Yeah.
Yeah. It's taken me forever. I mean, it was just one of those things that, being a creative person, I'm like, what? Bylaws? Like what are
right.
So, again, I'm like, I want to make the website look nice. But yeah, so it's been interesting to learn that side of things too. Because I definitely have a vision and point of view that I'm excited to make happen. So once I sort of got a list of what I need to do, now I'm off to the races, and I have a great team of volunteers that have just been amazing with advice and free time and,
That's so cool in life
yeah.
when you can be that person or that stage in your career where you are using all of your gifts and all of your passions in one singular role. I think that's like a dream come true for me.
It is. It's really exciting.
What are some of the practical tools and services that your organization is providing right now? You had mentioned the job board.
Yeah, so we have a job board up now, so it's free. I don't want companies to have to pay.
Yeah, how does that work?
All they have to do is email info@womeninvinyl.com, send me the job. They can actually log in and post it, and then it's there. And if it's going to expire, they hear from me, and I ask if they want me to keep it up or not. But yeah, so that's on the site. Right now, I think we have 3 or 4 pressing plants represented, which is great because who thinks that you can get a job there? But there's a lot of opportunities up right now.
Yeah.
I would love to expand it to get some labels and other opportunities up soon. So,
by the way, as we were talking about this, I connected recently with Sound Girls, that organization. That's such a cool thing. Very, very similar to what you guys are doing. I love that.
Yeah, they're awesome. And Jet Galindo, who's on our board, she also does some work with Sound Girls, and we've actually been able to do a couple panels with them on vinyl and jobs in vinyl. Yeah,
that's cool. What exists in this space for young girls, like middle school or high school? I think that's a great age to be inspired and to start to find an identity in something like music and production.
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing that we try to do is really have fun social media, fun imagery, fun blogs, so that, young girls can read it. Nothing on there would be, 18 or older.
Yeah, no, that's, like that, that's smart. That's something like that you wouldn't normally think of.
Yeah. And so, I definitely have that. We are going to be creating white papers. And I was like, oh, a white paper is like literally black and white information on a page. And then I was doing some research and come to find out that like times have changed there too. And there are these like beautiful things.
Can you explain it? Explain it for us.
Yeah. So like just truly an information source. So if you're like, what is plating? You can go to Women in Vinyl and you can go to resources and you can find information on what plating is in the vinyl manufacturing process. And, in the past, when I think of it from like a college perspective, it's literally like if you were reading an essay, like a boring black and white thing. And it's just like truly just like information, no extra words. And so I was doing some research on these for the site, and I was like, okay, now they're like beautiful square spaces.
Oh,
like
interesting.
So they're not the same as they used to be. So now my creative brain is going, and it's taking me a little bit longer to get those up.
And that's got to be part of like the empowering process, is just terminology. Like that's incredible.
Yeah, and videos. That's another thing that we're working on. Is creating those videos for turntable setups, and just different kind of hacks. Like I know when Robin was on here, she was mentioning how like anybody should be able to get into records no matter what they buy to begin with. And there's a local record store here, Birdland Records, and Alicia is the owner. And she was wanting to do these videos. And so we're kind of talking about how can we maybe collaborate to create these things, because she gets so many girls that come into her store and they want to buy a turntable, but people aren't always willing to commit on their first turntable to something that's expensive.
Yeah.
So if they're going to buy a Crosley, what Crosley do they buy?
Right.
Because there are different types.
Sure.
So things like that, or, like Robin has a hack for weighting your tone arm on a Crosley.
Oh, yeah. She told me that. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's funny.
Yeah. So just those kinds of things we're a resource for how to do things, learn things without feeling like someone's judging you for it.
Yeah. Yeah. When you talked about the meme, I can't stand it when people talk about like poop on the Crosley, which I'm sure like there are some like long-term problems with the Crosby on your vinyl, but just the idea about people getting something accessible and using it as a gateway, I just think, to me, I will never criticize anyone for buying music or supporting music.
Exactly. Exactly. However you need to start, fine. And I'll always give people recommendations, and then sometimes they'll take them. Sometimes they're saying, oh, well, like one of my former students wanted to get his girlfriend a turntable, and I gave him these recommendations of like cost-effective things. And he's like, I ended up buying her a Crosley because I don't know if she's going to be into it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I was like, that's totally fine. I was like, if like she's ready to upgrade at some point, those are all like a great next step.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And that's the thing. And I remember we had friends of ours, and we were thinking about buying their teenage daughter a Crosley because she had said she'd wanted a record player, and her parents were asking me, and it was the same kind of thing. And I've thought about it for my kids as well. It's like, get a $100 thing just in case you find it on their bedroom floor in like 3 months from now and they're not into it anymore.
Right.
Yeah.
Like how many people had like the Sesame Street one or whatever?
Yeah. Oh, those are great.
Yeah.
Let's pivot for a second and talk about vinyl. Its popularity has been this insane incline for like the past 15 years. There was this shortage of pressing machines, and then that started to get better, and then COVID has messed everything up again. What's going on? Like I know you work at a plant, or I read that. Yeah. Can you give us an update from the inside of what's going on?
Oh, well, so yeah, COVID was crazy. I mean, that's really where all of this started.
Because things were going okay, right? Before that?
Things were, well, so there was 2020 was a mess because there was
the fire.
The Apollo fire. Yes. So that was sort of started it all off with, okay, now our industry is hit because there's a lacquer shortage. And so people were scrambling to get the Japanese MDC lacquers thankfully, that's what we always used. So we were in a good spot. So we were able to kind of continue trucking along there. But then after that, COVID happened and everybody, as you know, was sort of like, is this thing? What's happening?
Right.
And so then shutdowns started happening. And so California was hit super hard. And like plating facilities that we use are out there. Jacket manufacturers like Stoughton are out there. RTI. So there's like a bunch of places had to shut down. Like there was just no option. For us, because we were considered manufacturing, we were able to stay open. But when all of those shutdowns happened, it caused a ton of supply chain backup.
Right.
So as people were starting to come back to work, well, all of those plating facilities were sitting with all of that work coming in and nobody to do it. So that was something that started happening. And then now there's a resin shortage. So like plastics.
Okay, I heard that. Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, like even your poly bags.
Wow.
So that's an issue. And then on top of that, there are less flights going back and forth from overseas.
Yeah. Right.
So now things are having to come by sea unless you want to pay crazy amounts. So all of your PVC now, for the most part, there are a couple. One that I know of for sure, manufacturers in the U.S. of PVC, but now all your PVC is coming by sea. So
and that's like months, right?
Oh yeah, and then like beginning of the year, there were like strikes happening at the ports. So things would get here and then they would sit there.
Wow.
So, I mean, yeah, it's been crazy, and we're booking so far out now. I mean, and that's been, in the back of my mind, what is that going to do for bands and small labels? Because tours are picking up again, but they can't get anything until like a year from now.
Oh my goodness. Is there, I don't know if this was just an anecdotal thing, but did the productivity of artists being more prolific during lockdown, did that add to anything at all? Was there more orders than normal?
There's definitely been more orders, and because of supply chain backup, it's harder to fill them as quickly. I think the interesting thing, having talked to Karen at Gold Rush, she mentions in our podcast episode how she sort of spent that time, because so many people were like figuring out, now's not a time necessarily to grow your business. Now's a time to figure out and survive through it.
Right.
So I think a lot of plants, and she's a good example, were figuring out who their client base is. And so if you have, a few machines, maybe your client base is better for 500-piece runs, 1,000-piece runs, or less, where other facilities that have, maybe 10, 12 presses, maybe they're better to help, some of the bigger labels or independent labels that put out higher quantities.
Sure.
And so I think figuring some of that out has been interesting. Yeah.
And then at the same time, I mean, vinyl is just still getting more and more popular. So there's just, and I think I talked to somebody back in April of the pandemic in the UK, and they were saying they were having their best, this was a label and a record store, and they were having their best online sales months ever because people wanted entertainment. They wanted books and music. And
exactly. Yeah. I mean, there's been no slowdown, and it's been great that record stores have been able to survive through this, because what a scary time for that kind of a business. But those that have been able to put their stock online or really utilize social media, I think have done really well.
Yeah. Oh man, there's a record store in my town who has just, they've had a tough go because they had some obstacles with construction, and then the pandemic hit, and then they've just done an incredible job at doing, live streams of their weekly inventory and giving people like a tour of the shop on Instagram stories. And like, I think they're just selling tons of vinyl through the DMs in their Instagram.
Yeah.
I've bought tons. I've discovered music through the live streams. And I think it's a fantastic thing, and I'm certain it'll stay even when things are back up, open and normal, and people flowing through the store.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, my concern is for the bands and small labels, and will they continue to order vinyl
Well,
during?
I was going to ask, because I am, online, I'm sensing like a modicum of resentment towards vinyl lately, like from smaller indie labels and artists, just because of the initial investment, the lead times.
This is why we need the education.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because someone that works at a plant, I feel like one of those trolls. I'm like, but resin, it's not us.
But can you empathize with these concerns at all? I mean, like, how do we keep vinyl from being inaccessible aside from the supply chain issues?
I think people just need to understand when to order and how to order, knowing that things are at least 16 weeks out.
Right.
So I think normally in a normal world, I would say get all your stuff together and then go for your vinyl. In this case, I'm like, if you have your album recorded and mastered, put it in for your test pressing.
Yes.
Get it in now. The metal parts are going to take weeks. It's going to take weeks to get your test presses done. Get that part done. Then you can worry about art. Then you can worry about packaging. Like, at least get that part started so that you are shrinking your lead time. Because
this is great advice. I was lucky enough to do that myself. As soon as the mastering was done, I knew things, and this was back in March. I knew things were rough, and I was exactly what you said. I was kind of going back and forth on the packaging, reverse board. I was deciding on the color of vinyl. I was worried about matching the color of the record with the sleeve, blah, blah, blah. But I was like, you know what? I've already got the test pressings back. They sound great. Like, that part's over with. And
right.
Yeah, that's so smart.
Yeah, I mean, that's a huge thing because I've seen, some small labels that I love just so frustrated, and they're, saying that the record pressing plants are upping their prices and this and that, and we're never going to up our prices to you. And I'm like, I totally understand that, but we have to charge more than we were before because again, like, if there's a shortage of something, it's going to be more expensive. We have to pass through that cost, or then there's nobody to press the records.
Yeah. And I should clarify, I'm not getting a sense of, and this is all just anecdotal BS, but I'm not getting a sense that people are resenting or upset with the plants, at least from my perspective. It's almost like vinyl as a concept. It's almost like, is this becoming out of our reach just because there have been so many things to pile on? But I'm not getting a sense that anybody is blaming the plants. I haven't heard that personally.
Yeah, I think I'm seeing a little bit of both.
I guess you're hearing from customers, so I can understand.
Yeah, I mean, still though, I don't think that it will go away. I'm just hoping that it won't become too niche that people decide to go another route.
Yeah, and I think this just probably happens whenever anything gets so big, and I don't think it's remotely close to going away, and I don't want it to go away. I don't want to stop making vinyl. I don't want to stop buying vinyl. Yeah, it's just like, I think everything just needs to kind of cool down, and hopefully we can get back to a place where the lead times are great. Because I remember years ago, the conversation was that there weren't that many machines that were working in the world, but I'm sure that's not true anymore. I'm sure is that the case, that there is more and more plants than there was, say, 5-10 years ago?
Because there's more plants, and then some of the old plants like Rainbow, when it shut down, its machines went elsewhere. So some of those machines have gone to another plant, and they're working with them now. But there's other companies like Viral and Phoenix Alpha that are creating new machines. So they're able to build those and get them up and running and creating records at a good speed. So I think as some of those other smaller plants get online and are able to take some of that like indie business and, band business, it's going to be a really great spot for them because they'll be able to get things in and out a lot quicker. And those plants will also then have like a good client base as well.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, and that is a good thing. That Viral company Canadian, I think. Is that right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. No, that is really cool. I mean, I love vinyl. I respect that it is such a artistic and old technology and format that it's just not something that can be rushed, and
Right.
I don't know, like what has technology helped improve things at all in the vinyl process, or is it still essentially the same as it was 50 years ago?
It's pretty much the same. I mean, there are people that are, you know, finding like electric pressing, and I think that was viral. It's doing that. There's, eco vinyl. There's things like that are happening, but they aren't at a place yet where it's the norm. So
Right.
things are still how they've been done. And I think that some of the newer machines are able to press records quicker. So you're not waiting for a really long cycle time. But it's still a process. And there's still so many things that can happen along the way. I mean, just when you think about how many people are involved in the process from like cutting to pressing, it's just there's so many steps.
Yeah, absolutely. And it really does make sense. I've been in a plant and I've seen the process, and it does make sense why it costs so much. Just all the different people and the different expertise involved. Not just like one person on an assembly line passing it to the next person. It's people
Right.
who are that division, that part of it is their expertise.
Yeah. Yeah.
How can let's go back to the community, to the organization. How can people in our community? I mean, we're talking with independent record labels mostly, but how can people in our community support you guys? Is there something that the average label or music fan can do to kind of get involved?
I would love to just continue to collaborate and for people to just get the word out about it. I think the job board is a great place to start. If you have an internship or something like that, it would be great to have that there so that people see diversity in the opportunities too. I think, for now, really, spreading the word that there's this place that you can go to learn these kinds of things and find your path into this industry, because running a pressing plant is very different than running a record store, but those are within the same industry in this case. So, if you come to Women in Vinyl and you read those profiles, you may find, well, wow, this is the thing I want to do. And then there's your first step.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I think that is really where we're at now. We're working on some sponsorship stuff. So hopefully within the next month or so, that will be ready to go too.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but I would think the end goal of organizations like yours would be to make yourself irrelevant, right? Like where equality is embedded and it's the default in our society. What does an ideal future look like to you?
Yeah, I mean, exactly that. This shouldn't need to be a thing. And hopefully Women in Vinyl will become a resource for people that isn't just about women in vinyl. It's for everyone. And we try to keep that in mind with everything we do. Like, we are women in vinyl, like we are highlighting women in vinyl, but we are also the women in vinyl. So if at some point we decide, on the podcast to have a man, like that doesn't mean that we're stepping back from our mission. It means we are the ones that are continuing to educate and drive the vinyl industry forward.
Yes. Yeah. No, that's great. I think we alluded to it, but what is your role at the plant? You work at a pressing plant?
Yeah. So I'm the sales and customer experience manager there. So I help bands, labels, get their order set up, plan what they want to do for their package, talk about release dates, and get their order set up and in. And then I work with our customer service team to make sure that the process from start to finish is a good one. And
how did you come to there from career coaching to design into the plant? Was it just purely a love for vinyl?
Yeah, I always loved records. My fiance, he also is a longtime record collector. So between the two of us, it's like just so many records, so many records. We enable each other. But we were living in Nashville, and he was working at the plant there. And I was like, I really want to do this. But there wasn't anything that really fit me there. And we're actually from this area in Northern Virginia. And funny enough, my mom found a posting for Furnace, and she was like, you should come home. They're opening a record pressing plant.
That's such a mom thing.
I know.
I found a job
Win-win.
for you.
Right.
And a boy.
Yeah. and it ended up that, I got the job. Ray, my partner, he's our QC manager, so he ended up getting a job there too. So,
awesome.
Yeah, so I mean, it's great. It's a really, I love being able to work with people to create what they want for their release.
And so you get to interact with independent musicians and independent labels, that kind of thing?
Exactly, yeah.
And talk about, I mean, that's the intimidating process for someone who's young in the industry, and this is maybe their first record, and they really want to see it on vinyl. And like, I really wish I had a friendlier sales rep for my first experience, because it was very intimidating. I
definitely feel a lot of time there is some advising happening.
Yeah.
Because it is. It's a learning process. I mean, especially with turn times and things too, making sure that we're being upfront about everything. I mean, our company policy is really bad news first. So if for some reason something is delayed, like if you end up with a scratch on your stamper, that can happen. But, if something like that happens, we make sure to tell people right away so that they can plan, because we understand like a lot of money goes into, release plans, to tours. Now that those are getting back up and running, people need those sales. So the sooner we can let you know, the sooner you can adjust.
Yeah. When we were talking about planning for your masters and whatnot, we had a plant on the show a couple years ago. And one of the things that their sales rep had said, I thought was a good idea, was even during the recording phase, it's probably a good time to start getting quotes for the project, introduce yourself to a sales rep. I just think like, for any independent musicians or any independent labels, like when the band starts working on the record, you should start working on the pressing. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah. At least get some quotes, figure out who, you're liking as far as plant and their culture and things like that. Yeah, 100%. The sooner the better. before I let you go, I have a question that is a little sensitive and personal, but I want to go back to your record collection here with your partner, and you've put this record collection together. When do you ever prune a record collection? Is that an appropriate thing to do? Like, what if it's taking up too much space, or do you relegate to the basement or to the attic, or like, what do you do? Because I'm at this stage where I have a very nice bookcase, and it's filling the bookcase, and I really want to start pruning records that I'm not proud of, or I don't really love anymore. Somebody gave them to me, and I want to maybe sell them or give them away. What are your thoughts on that? Is that wrong to do? No, I don't think so. I mean, we probably need to do that. when we recently bought a house, and when we were looking for a place, that was like the biggest thing. Where, like, will this be enough space for our records?
Check the floor beams, right? To see if it can handle the weight.
Our lower floor is a record floor. It's the whole space.
Wow.
So, yeah, and we laugh about it, but we have a turntable in almost every room.
Oh, really? That's cool.
Yeah. So, I mean, they are all consuming. But yeah, I mean, we're already running out of space. So I think it is about time for that.
Yeah, it's a tough one. I kind of, and I also got into like, I have like original copies, like you talked about, like I have original copies from 60s and 70s of records, but then if they do like a repressing, like a remaster or something, I'll usually grab that. But I obviously don't want to get rid of my old ones, but then having two of the same record in the rack seems kind of silly when I'm running out of space. So gosh, it's tons of tons of problems I'm dealing with over here.
I know. Quality over quantity, right? Though. So, I mean, if they're both great, why not?
Yeah. No, that's true. No, it's really interesting. Do you have a preference with like vinyl right now is, and tell me if this is off base, but I'm afraid of pressing black vinyl just because I feel like the expectations of music fans is like, it has to be clear, it has to be blob, it has to be splatter. Like, what do you think of that? And what is your favorite packaging situation? I imagine it changes a lot.
Yeah, it changes a lot. I think it depends on how much time you have.
Okay.
Because
like on the podcast or in your manufacturing? What do you mean?
Well, kind of both, but no, as far as manufacturing though, like if you're going to do like a splatter or a blob or half and half or anything like that, those are all pressed one at a time. So the lead time on those is going to be longer.
Okay.
So I think that that's something to take into account. I think a lot of it depends on who your audience is. There are, like if you're an audiophile community type person, then maybe you want to splurge for 180 gram, for example. But if that isn't your audience, don't pay the extra money for it.
Oh, yeah.
So things like that, I think...
Sorry, can I interrupt you for a second? Is that just an aesthetic thing? Just the weight? Or is there any... Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
I mean, there are, within the audiophile community, there's a bunch of different reasons why that's thought to be better. One of them is less vibration on the platter because it's heavier.
Sure.
But there's not like a groove depth difference or anything like that. It really is just more of an aesthetics and preference within certain communities. So if your audience is the type that, definitely wants a colored record, then why not,
That's a great point. Yeah, that's a great point.
But I think kind of like we were talking about earlier, if it's a nice package, I'm all for it.
Yeah.
If you have nice cover art and like a blue record will go really well with your cover art, or like pull out something you're trying to enhance, like why not?
Yeah. I was absolutely losing my mind over something because I had included on the artwork of a record I was working on this like neon yellow, neon green. And then the plant had showed me their version of highlighter yellow or something. And I was like, well, I don't know. Like, how am I going to match that? Like, I didn't have the time or the resources necessarily to go get a sample of the record. And it was in COVID and print something off. And I was just freaking out. And then I'm like, so I opted to go with something completely different, like clear, and then not try to match it at all. I was being very anal about it.
Or like find a nice something that like brings it out. So if you're doing highlighter yellow, maybe like a nice green or something.
Right. Yes. I thought that too. Yeah. Yeah. It was so, and the funny thing is that I had gone through this process and I had some Pantone books out and I was being very, very specific and neurotic about the whole thing. And then I like pulled out this like Tom York record and the orange vinyl was way off from the orange on the jacket. I'm like, what? Like they didn't go through that process that I went through? Like lazy.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so fun to work with people on stuff like that and give them suggestions. I have one client that really loves to collaborate like that, and it's so much fun.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it really is. And I just think, when I see a record that I love comes out and it's like just, that standard like pocket sleeve and it's a black vinyl and it's just the digital artwork, blown up. I'm not as excited to, and I maybe won't even buy it, whereas if it's a band I'm not too familiar with and it's a new record that sounds cool and the packaging is incredible, then I'll be more likely to spend my money on that. Right.
Yeah. I think that's definitely, especially with the Instagram community, it's even more so. There's that visual,
true.
Yeah.
Well, this has been fun. I could probably do this for another hour, but thank you so much for taking the time. I'll mention at the end, all of the stuff about the organization. Well, what does the next couple of months look like? I know you're working towards the charitable thing, but are there things on the horizon, post-pandemic that you're excited about or something that's coming up with Women in Vinyl?
I think really it's just the expansion of all of these things. It's like until a year and some ago, it was just me.
Yes.
And so now we have all of these things that we're working on that it feels like I had to make a list the other day to be like, what do I need to focus on first? So I think really like the nonprofit status is my biggest focus. And then sort of expanding into these avenues of resources on the website. So like I recently created a list on the website of all female-owned record stores. So that when people are going out,
I love that.
So when people are going out for Record Store Day, if they want to support that, they can. And just other things like that. I really want to get the resources set up so people have a place to go. Like I love when people go to your site that you have all of those resources, and I want to kind of work more on that.
Yeah, when you were saying that, I was thinking about our site, and it is, it's really nice to just like anytime that you think of something or you have a template that you're using, it's like throw it up on there and share it with people, because that just is encouraging for people. It's empowering and it's so fun to have that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for doing this. It's been great to chat with you.
Yeah, same. It's fun.
Thank you all for listening. Go to womeninvinyl.com. You've got to go and camp out on their website for a little bit. They have some merch. You can get a link to their podcast, which is really great in there. And you can also support their podcast through Patreon. So find out more about the organizations, their jobs board, and their list of women-run record stores is also there. So go to womeninvinyl.com, and I think they have some social platforms you can follow as well. Thank you so much for listening to this episode. If you are new to the show, please head to our website, otherrecordlabels.com, where you can link to our private Facebook group, which is just for indie record labels. And you can join us over there, as well as you can download our record label toolkit. It's this huge toolkit. I'm updating it today with a new recording contract. And it's a toolkit that has templates and checklists and a bunch of things to help your record label or your future record label. So to get that toolkit, go to otherrecordlabels.com/toolkit. Thanks for listening.